Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Well, check this out folks. I picked up this old Go Kart the other day, which is powered by a Victa engine. It looks like it's an old Victa stationary engine, but check this Go Kart out. I'm not sure if it's a genuine Victa car or not. Perhaps you want to leave a comment down below, but I'm going to do a walk around on this Victa Go Kart now, and let's go through it together of what we've purchased here. I mean, just look at this thing. I mean, this looks like it was actually really well manufactured back in the day. You can see it's got the classic early Victa engine on it. It's probably a 125, I would guess. Got some sort of a clutch running right there down onto a drive axle. Coming around here, we've got a bit of a Victa air filter snorkel attachment there. The traditional muffler. Now it's missing a starter here, and it's got some sort of a fuel tank jerry rigged up here, and it's got a braking hub here. You can see everything actually looks like it's all there, it's all intact. So obviously we've got the accelerator on this side, and as we push that, we can see that's all working straight through to the carburetor on the Victa engine, and we've got a brake on this side, and you can actually tell that when we pull that brake, it locks up that rear axle completely. So even the brake hub's working on this thing. And the best part about it, I can actually fit in it. So we've got steering that works, got an accelerator, a brake. Well, I think what we've got to do is get the pressure washer out, actually get into giving this a thorough clean, start a bit of a disassembly. I can feel the rear axles just a little bit locked up. So let's get everything disassembled, lubed up, greased up, and let's see if we can actually get into this thing, give it a decent makeover, get the engine running, and have a little bit of fun with this Victa kart. Question is, will it run, and can we get it going? So let's start by giving it a thorough soak down with the old truck wash. Just go over the whole thing, give it a thorough coating, and then let's hit it with the pressure washer. So straight away that's looking 100% better, having just had that little bit of a clean. And if you've watched any of my videos on Victa lawnmowers, etc., you would know that I love to always start with a decent clean. So I'm actually working with a clean machine to start with. But something I didn't show you before, this Go Kart actually came with this little trolley. Now, to start with, I just thought it was a little sack truck that wasn't part of it, but it's got this little ridge along here, and it's actually been designed so you can lift up the rear of the Go Kart like this, place it under there, so you can actually start the engine up, and whilst it's got the clutch, you can actually rev it up a bit and get those rear wheels spinning, get that engine warmed up, tuned up, and ready to go racing with this Victa kart. So anyway, let's get into this and look a bit further what we're going to do now with the disassembly. Let's start by trying to get this fiberglass seat out. Now what's interesting is when I was cleaning it, I can see it's not even screwed in at all. It's just kind of like sat in there, and it's like held in by these side rails. So I'm just wondering whether the chair was actually put in first, or if I can actually flex these side rails enough to get it out. Let's see. I mean, it's pretty damn tight. As I say, it is a tight fit in there. And I do really want to get it out so we can give this thing a thorough clean up. Let's try this side here. There we go. Pop that out just like that. You can see it's got some sort of rubber mounts that actually just pushed up against the seat. So I'm thinking next we should get all of this old rubber and foam off of the metal chassis around the place. So let's just see how we can have a look at this. You can see this one was just split on there. Don't even need to cut it off. So we can just pull that off like that. And we might even be able to reuse that or get a new piece of, I don't know, it looks like a piece of rubber hose in the future. So get that off. The one on this side. Got the one down the front here for the feet. The one over here, and then let's see if we can get this off of the steering wheel as well. Looks like a bit of old, to be honest, the insulation that goes on hot water service pipes. So next I'm thinking, let's get this little fuel tank off, and I'll just start by undoing the fuel line there. See if we can pull that off. Yep, that's good there. You can see it's fairly crudely just held on with electrical wire here, so shouldn't be too hard to get that undone there. I reckon we're going to be able to do a little bit better than this. Maybe make a nice little bracket or mount up another tank, but you know, the size is probably not too bad. That looks like it's actually just in some plastic PVC pipe there. Get that off out the way. And let's get the air filter housing there completely released. It's just held on with a cable tie. So let's get that undone. So that's free. And over here, let's undo the throttle cable from over here. Now, a little bit of ingenuity. This actually looks like it's an electrical connection was used to stop the throttle cable going back any further or to hold it in position. In all honesty, it's not a bad idea because I think these carburetors had a little bit of trouble with the idle adjustment. So with doing it like this, the old mate who made this go-kart was probably able to set the idle really easily down here just by adjusting the length by which the throttle actually pulled. So get that off, and then hopefully we can just pull that out. Now we can get the engine off of the frame. Let's start by undoing the 4 bolts, the main bolts which hold the Victa engine to the frame. I'm just going to get a bit of penetrating spray onto those bolts. I mean, they haven't been undone in a very long time. Might actually just get a bit of this spray, you know, around the place. And then let's see if we can actually get these nuts to actually come free. Oh yeah, that one wasn't too bad. And the one down here. This one's a bit tighter. There we go. And the one down the bottom, let's see if we can break that one loose as well. So let's see if we can actually get this clutch mechanism off. Just got my rattle gun and a 13/16 socket on there. That fits on nicely. Just see if we can get that off. Now that doesn't really want to move at all. I'm pretty sure it will be anti-clockwise to get it off, but let's get a big breaker bar and see if we can move it with a breaker bar. Now perhaps my bad, I can see there's actually a couple of grub screws in here. I'll bring you in close, but let's get those grub screws undone and then let's see if we can get the impact back on here. So we can see we've got a grub screw here and here. There's none others, so let's get those undone. Fortunately that came easily then. Undo that. Won't take it all the way out. And let's get onto this one here as well. Oh, that one's easy as well, so let's just back that out. Like I say, I won't take it all the way out, but that's certainly going to be enough if that was stopping that shaft then spinning. Let's get that impact back on now. There we go. That's come out like a piece just like that. Now let's see how the rest of this potentially will come out. Now I can see just looking at this, there's a slot in that bracket. So I think that's actually been made to be effectively the tensioner. So let's undo this bottom one on this bracket here because I just want to get the slack off of this chain. See if we can, yeah, that's coming. It's like none of the bolts are actually seized on this, which is pretty good. It looks rusty, but everything actually appears to be coming apart quite easily, which is nice. Let's just get something on the other end of this here. There we go. Maybe we just need to loosen this one off at this side as well, just so it'll pivot. There we go. And we can see we can actually get a little bit of movement and loosen off this chain a little bit. And we might even be able to get the chain off if we can get enough movement there. So I'm not sure why I didn't think of this before, but let's get this little trolley under the rear end of the go-kart, which probably just help us get this chain off. Now I'll bring you around the other side because I've also found another bolt that's mounting the engine to the frame. I assumed it would just use the standard 4 bolts, but whoever made this go-kart really went to town and they've put another bracket over on this side as well. I'll bring you around and show you. So around here, they've actually made up another bracket which actually mounts to the motor where the original starter cover would have come on the motor. So let's get that off as well. Just come in under here. I'm not sure, to be honest, that it was actually necessary, but it's there and gonna have to get it off to get this engine off. There we go. And let's get this one off in here as well. That might just come off with our fingers. And then perhaps we can just get the whole engine off. There we go. You can see that chain straight away now is gonna come off. Get that off like that. And hopefully we can just lift the engine out the way. There we go. So with that engine off and out of the way, we can now spin the rear axle freely. And you can hear straight away, those bearings are pretty rumbly. So I'm either gonna have to get new bearings for it or see if I can grease these bearings up. But regardless, let's see if we can get that outer wheel off, get that chain off and maybe get that chain soaking in some sort of penetrating fluid just to clean that up. And then we'll have a look at bearings. So once again, let's just get some penetrating fluid onto that nut there and see if we can find a socket that fits. Feels a bit big. Let's try this one. Here, no. Yeah, maybe that one will do the trick. There we go. And let's see if that wheel will actually come off now. Perhaps we can give that bit of a whack. It's got that end bit there, so you won't burr the thread. That does not look like that is going anywhere at all, but we'll just put some penetrating fluid on that and perhaps we'll be able to get that to move, but yeah, I don't think we're going to have luck with that. That is on there. So there you go, with the help of my block splitter, we've managed to get that wheel off. We can get the chain out and get that soaking in something, I don't know, some old transmission fluid or something, get that cleaned up. You can see it's actually got this key in the axle that obviously locks up that wheel. So that's just fantastic how that's come off there. And yeah, we can still hear those bearings. So let's get that wheel off the other side. Just get everything absolutely apart and start cleaning this up 100%. So now that we've got the rear wheels off, I reckon it's time to try to get the front wheels off of this go-kart. So maybe we can just get those little grease caps off there. And let's see if we can get a, I don't know, a socket onto that and get that off there. So with all of the wheels off, I've just taped up the axles with a bit of tape because we're gonna try to strip all the paint and repaint the frame. But next thing I'm going to do is try to get this bit of aluminum on the bottom off, and there's probably a little bit of aluminum off here, which has got this switch. It wasn't actually hooked up to that engine, that switch, but I'm guessing it was meant to be a kill switch, and I will be trying to get the kill switch back into action. But for now, let's just try to get this off so that we can actually paint the frame. And then we can get the whole kill switch wire off the whole way up. Just cut this old insulation tape here, get that all off and out the way. And then we can flip the whole frame over, get this trolley off the back here, and just bring it round on that block of wood. And then we can get this piece of aluminium off, or aluminum as the American viewers say. Then after that we might see if we can get the axle out, the rear axle, and then we'll get stuck into prepping up this frame. So looking at this, it's a good job we're actually pulling all of this apart, because we've actually got a big crack in the frame. You can see it's broken here, so we're gonna have to weld that back up as well, and just, you know, give everything a thorough inspection. Okay, so having had a bit of a look at this back axle, these grub screws on the sprocket are really tight. I just can't get those undone. And I think the noise is actually coming from the brake hub anyway. So for now, I'm actually just gonna leave the back axle alone, and I'm gonna get stuck into just stripping off the paint. So I've got some paint stripper here. I'm gonna paint that onto the underside. We'll scrape that, and then we'll flip it the other way, and we'll strip the paint on the top side as well. So just paint that on all over here, and then we'll put a fresh coat of paint on it in just a bit. As you can see, because I've taped up those axles before, so we don't get anything on those, so should be good to go, and we'll get this nicely painted. So whilst I was cleaning the frame, I noticed yet another bracket and bolt holding the brake drum to the frame. So it's another example of this go-kart is really well, perhaps over-engineered. However, you know, I was trying to get the axle off earlier, couldn't get it off, and it's a good thing that I just stopped, went on with something else, because as I was working, I saw this extra bracket. So I'm just going to try to undo this bolt now. Hopefully that's the last bolt we actually have for the bracket. Yep, you can see that's actually screwing out. It looks like it's actually threaded into a nut, perhaps that's welded into the whole frame, but it is coming out, fortunately. And then perhaps we'll try to remove that rear axle again. I still do have the one stud Allen key for the main sprocket, which I can't get, but perhaps I can buy a stronger Allen key. But we'll see if we can actually just shift the axle with that little bolt out there now. So what I might also do is actually mark with some blue paint, because I'm going to remove the axle this way, if I can get it out. Just mark with some blue paint so we can see just there where the axle lined up, and I'll just rotate that around and maybe perhaps put try to put a skinnier one, but right on where the axle will come out. And then also on this side, mark where the sprocket is, and I'll just do it in the keyway. I noticed there is actually no key in the sprocket, which perhaps when we put it back together, we will want to put a key in there. So let's see if we can loosen these clamps up here on the axle. So those ones come undone. There's no issues there with that one. And the same with this one here. So the issue we had before was the one on the sprocket. Could just try it again. It feels like it's going to break my Allen key. It feels like I need a stronger Allen key, but why don't we see if we can just even move the shaft a little bit. So give it a couple of taps. All right, so we can see now we're definitely getting some good movement there along that shaft. So let's see if we get a bit of heat onto this, whether we can release this grub screw. Oh, that is in there tight. Okay, so I had another go at trying to get that rear brake hub off. I'll chuck a photo in of a puller setup that I set up, but it really just won't budge. And I'm putting so much force on it that I'm worried that I might actually break the hub and or have trouble getting it back on if I do actually remove it. And to be honest, feeling the bearings, as I said earlier, the bearings don't feel that battered. The noise is actually coming from the hub. So for now, I'm just gonna leave that. I probably might have another go in the future, but I'm gonna actually attempt now to fix up these cracks in the frame. So I'll get the welder out, probably put you on time lapse, clean up the crack in the frame, and we'll weld the frame back up. All right, so I'll bring it in close, but as you can see, this side of that crack is really closed up nicely. I'm using my Unimig Viper welder. I've done a review on that in the past. I certainly am no welder, but it's so easy to use. You just point and pull the trigger, and it just takes care of the weld for you. It's gasless, so you do have a little bit of slag, and I just use my grinder to clean that up. But I'll flip it over now, and we'll get the weld on the other side of that pipe where it was cracked and out of shape. We'll get that all closed up and we'll get this frame really strong. So now we've stripped the frame, I've welded up that crack. I also straightened the front end that was a little bit dented. It was actually dented on that side where the crack in the frame was. So obviously that hit something and bent that front end a little bit and cracked the frame. I've masked up and taped up the back axle and the gear that I don't want any paint on, because as you know, I couldn't get that axle off and didn't really want to risk one, damaging pieces, the drum, and also not being able to get them back on. And as I've explained, I think the bearings are actually quite good. It's actually just the noise is coming from the brake drum the more and more I look at it. And with a little bit of use, that'll clean up. So let's now start undercoating the frame. I'll undercoat the bottom, then I'll flip it over, undercoat the top, and then we'll get onto a nice red top coat. All right, check this out. I'm actually really happy with the way the paint has turned out on this go-kart frame. And I even managed to remember to throw a bit of paint on the dolly, which holds the back axle up when you're starting up that engine to warm it up. I think it's come up a real treat. So I think now it's actually time to look into the power source for this Victa go-kart. So I've been thinking about the various different options. This is the motor that came off of the go-kart. And the reason that I'm actually looking at different options is it doesn't have a pole starter on it. Now, I've been hunting around. This to me is a really early generation Victa 125. I'm not actually sure what it's off of, but I don't seem to have a pull start mechanism. Over here, I've got a slightly later generation Victa 125. That's got a pull start mechanism on it, but I don't know if it'll run. And over here, I've got a Victa 160 off of a lawnmower, which I was thinking, well, I could just rotate that around and set that up with a standard carburetor, but then I'd probably have slightly different mounting. So I'm actually thinking in terms of authenticity, this is a later generation, this 125 power plant unit over here compared to the original. And as you can see, it's actually already on a little mini bracket or something there. So I'll be able to take that off. But I'm thinking, let's have a look into this Victa 125 we've got over here. It's actually got a pull starter on it that's compatible with the engine. And let's see if we can actually get this to run for the Victa powered go-kart. And it's probably worth noting that I can't put this starter on because the head's actually different. We'll come across here, you can see not only is the head rotated on this one, but if I rotated the head around here, it just doesn't have the indents into those fins to allow the starter to bolt up. And I think even looking at this pulley that's on here, this looks like it's a much bigger pulley than what would be in underneath this zip starter from my perspective. So why don't we just start having a look at this? Probably the first thing I'll do is actually check to see if this stationary Victa 125's even got spark. I know it's got good compression because when I pull on the handle, it is really hard to pull. So let's see if it's got spark. If it's got spark, let's see if we can get some sort of a fuel tank rigged up, and let's see if we can even get this to run. So to test the spark, let's get the spark plug out to start with. Let's see if just get that undone at the top there. It feels a little bit tight. No, I got it. Get that lead off and then get our spark plug tool. There we go. And get that lead back on the top, just like that. And then what we want to do, we just want to ground out the spark plug. I've got this handy lead which I've made up. Just makes it easy when I'm working on my own. So put that one end on the spark plug, the other end anywhere on the engine block. And then we just turn it over and we look for spark in that spark plug. And then let's pull it over. And straight away you can see we've got really strong spark coming out of this Victa 125. So now that we know we've got spark, let's get our test lead off there and out the way. Let's get the spark plug back in. And then I'm thinking let's just rig up some sort of a temporary fuel tank and see if we can get this Victa to fire up. Grab my spark plug spanner and just do that up snug in there. Get that lead on. See if we can get this thing to fire up. I'm thinking just tie that temporary fuel tank up there like that onto the trailer and give her a pull, see if she fires up. So I really have no idea about these old stationary Victa motors and carburetors. I'm guessing that this is some sort of a primer here. So if I hold that down, I don't know, for 3 seconds, I can't see anything trickling out. It doesn't have a muffler, it's just got this bit of bent pipe on it. So it's gonna be noisy if it goes. So I'm thinking I'll just pull the handle and see if she goes. Maybe I'll give that a bit more of a tickle there. I really don't know. But let's come around here, get onto the bit of a throttle maybe like that, and give it a pull. So like I said, I've never had this power plant 125 running, but let's pop the fuel line off on the bottom and just check that we've got fuel actually running. She's pretty tight there, to be honest. Let me see if I can grab some pliers. Let's see if we can get this fuel line off and just check that we've actually got fuel flowing through this line from that tank. Well, she ain't gonna be much good if there's no fuel actually coming out the line. So my bad, maybe I just haven't put enough fuel actually into that little temporary tank. But you can see there, she's clearly got no fuel coming out. All right, let's try this again. So let's just start by tipping a bit more fuel into this tank. Maybe I was a bit too mean. Let's just tip everything I've got. Now, this is just a 2-stroke mix that I've got mixed up here. To be honest, it's probably about a 125 mix, which I'm going to guess is what these old power plants would have taken. But regardless, I always run really good quality 2-stroke oil. So normally I'm running steel chainsaw oil. So just to make sure I'm looking after my two strokes. Oh, and we can see straight away, so she's not really getting much flow down the bottom. Okay, so after some investigation, turns out the fuel line that I had on that old tank was actually blocked. So it just goes to show that, you know, your two-stroke fuel mix with bad fuel, bad oil, if it sits for a few years, it'll completely block. The line was completely and absolutely blocked. Who knows the state of the carburetor, but as you can see, I've made a hell of a mess down here now. It's definitely got flow coming through. So let's try that little, what I think is a primer. I don't know, 1, 2, 3. Then let's try and give this a pull again and see if she'll fire up. Give that a bit more of a tickle. Well, I think it must be time to try some starting fluid. So let's just give that a bit of a squirt of starting fluid in there. And we'll give that a try again. She's alive, folks. Well, folks, I'm just stoked. We've got a running Victa 125 that I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to use on that go-kart. As you can see, she was dancing all over the floor. She'd got no exhaust. That little bit of a curve fell off. I think it danced out of a bit of field of view, but you get the idea. She's running. So now what I'm thinking I need to do is, I didn't actually paint up the brackets. I'll just grab this other motor that's over here. Didn't paint up the brackets that came on the original, so I think I should get those off. I should probably mark them so I don't get them mixed up as to where exactly they go, but I'll get those painted up. We'll get that paint drying so it matches the frame, and then, to be honest, because that's going to be noisy, I'm thinking, I wonder if I can get this exhaust off of the original onto the 125 over here. I'm also wondering if this carburetor may be a better carburetor, and maybe I can swap that on. But let's just take it from there. Also, you can see this one's got a clutch assembly, but the sprocket on the clutch is actually around the other way on the orientation. So I'll just bring this around here. You can see it's got the sprocket on the inside, whereas this one's got the sprocket on the outside. So we've either got to get this clutch onto this motor or somehow spin this one round the other way. So I've got a bit of modification to do. Also, I can see on this one, it looks like it's had some sort of a kill switch up here on the cowling. So I'm just wondering if I can maybe take the cowling off, and if I can run, remember the go-kart frame had a switch just under the steering wheel, so we can actually switch the engine off from under the steering wheel, so get all of that working as it should. So we've got a bit of work to do, folks, but with two motors, I reckon we can make one that absolutely fits up to the go-kart frame. We know we've got a good runner here with a pull start. So let's get these brackets off of this original motor that's come with the go-kart. What I did was I just took a couple of photos so I can make sure I get the orientation correct for when that goes back on. So I'm thinking, let's just hit this first with a bit of rust restorer converter. So let's see if we can also get this muffler off. Need a bit of an adapter there. So chuck that on there and see if we can get that off. And I'm thinking I've probably got some silver high temperature exhaust paint around the place. Let's see. Oh, she looks like she's really on there. Let's get it maybe around like that. Oh yeah, that's got that moving. Putting up a bit of a fight, isn't it? There we go. Got that off perfectly. So hopefully we might be able to, if we get that off there, yeah, I reckon that will come around because we won't have this base, and we can actually probably bolt that in on the side there as well. So let's give this maybe a bit of a hit with the wire wheel, and then we'll paint this up nice and silver. So whilst the paint's drying on those brackets and the muffler, let's get all of the tape we taped up on the go-kart, on these axles and the sprocket and that brake drum. Let's get all that off, ready to start the reassembly process. So now that we've got the go-kart prepped, I think it's time to start working on this little engine, the one we got running before. And we're going to have to get the clutch off to remove it from this mount. But also I want to see if we can turn this around the other way so that the sprocket is on the inner side, because that is the way that the original one was set up, with the sprocket on the inside. Else we'll have to swap the clutch from the motor over there onto this engine here. So let's see if we can get this off now. Okay, so that comes off like that. That was pretty easy. Now, I can see there's a grub screw on the inside. I'll just bring it in close so you can see. So let's get that grub screw undone, and then let's see if we can get this clutch mechanism off of this. Now, it does look like that is fairly firmly on there, that clutch. So I'm thinking if I get this puller set up in here, I can get that behind without damaging, hopefully, the clutch, and just pull that off. So I'm thinking if I use this setup that I've got here, it might be the best way. Else I've got these 3-jaw pullers, but I think this was likely to do less damage. So let's try and get this set up on here. This, I don't know, this old school bearing puller. I picked this up from a tool maker that's retired, and he's cleaning up his shed the other day. He's such a great guy. Picked up all of these pullers from him, and just a pity he's throwing a lot of his tools away, and he sold these to me, I think, pretty cheap compared to what you'd have to buy to get this sort of quality nowadays. And it's just a dying breed, the old tool makers and lathe operators, fitter and turners and the likes. So really lucky on this score here with all this nice pullers and equipment that I got. Let's just get that apart there. And then I think if I get that threaded right in there, get that on before we even start, and do the same on this side here. So I want to get that in like that. Bring that in behind. Question is, are we going to have room? I'm not sure. Let's see what we can do here. So let's see if we can get it around the other way. Couldn't quite get it in far enough, but around this way, look at that. We can get that in there like that, and then let's see if we can get this on here. Look at that. I reckon this might just do the trick. Well, that was a heck of a lot easier than I was expecting. Perhaps I was expecting a bit of a fight like that brake drum gave me on that rear axle there, but as you can see, just a little bit of a knock with a little bit of torsion, and that has popped off straight away. So we can see that clutch now has come out. We can get the puller out of the way, and what I'm hoping is that I'm going to literally be able to just spin that around like that, slide it back on, yeah, and then just have the sprocket on the inside. So I think that's going to work really well. But now that we've got that clutch off, I might just put that back on there like that so we don't lose it. You know what I'm thinking? If you watch any of my videos, you know that I always really like to work on a super clean engine. So whilst this is like this and still on this little stand, I'm going to give this a bit of a degrease and a thorough clean. Might just tape up the ports on the carburetor there, and we'll make it absolutely sparkling before we dig any deeper. Something I've been struggling with is this back brake. As you can see, that's spinning there freely, but when we apply the brake, and I've taken my hand off the brake doesn't release. We have to actually press this little lever down here, which actually then releases that back axle, allowing it to spin. I'll bring you in close so you can see what I'm talking about. However, I've kind of been stalled for a few days on this project, trying to work out how do I resolve this issue when we press that brake down, how it doesn't release the brake. So when I started looking at this problem, I kind of thought what I wanted to do was to be able to have some sort of a counter spring like this, which would then flex that lever back down off of that pivot point. And I've got a few springs I've been looking at. How can I possibly get those in to push this lever back down just like that to allow the axle to continue spinning? You can see I've got it locked in the locked up position there. But I'm just thinking to actually rig up one of these springs is probably going to be quite difficult. So what I'm wondering, I'll flip the go-kart upside down, but can I weld a piece of bar that goes across the complete pivot point and then use one of these springs to actually pull it back from the other side? Let's flip the go-kart over and have a look. So I'll flip the go-kart upside down, as you can see. Hopefully you can see we've got the drum here, the axle spins, brake goes on, and then you can feel it's quite locked up in there. So off, spins nicely. And I hope you can see, so my thought is perhaps it's easy to actually weld some sort of a bar across here and then to pull down with that spring. So I've got my MIG welder out again. Let's see if we can weld up something in there and see if we can attempt to just pull down on that bar, added an extra lever point going around the other way. So let's just first clean off that lovely paint which we put on. So I found this old peg or something out in the shed, which I've drilled a hole in so I could get that spring on like that. And then I've got that in one of the holes down there on the go-kart. And you can see if that comes across just like that, if we apply the brake, which would be pushing it down like that, you can see that's locked up. Now, if I just try to let the spring do the work, you see that's pulling it off just perfectly. So I really think this solution's going to work. So I just need to try to see if I can get a couple of little welds with a MIG welder in on that bracket. It's not going to take much. And that'll just secure that on there nicely. And then I can chop off the excess over here afterwards. So as you saw, I welded that bit of rod on that lever there so I could come out the other side and hook this spring up. So now when we spin that axle, you can see that spinning freely. Straight away it comes off. It can spin again. There we go. I'm really happy with that outcome. So we've now sorted the issue with that brake dragging. So now we can actually get to reassembling everything. I'll probably hit that with a little bit of paint. We've just done that welding just so that it doesn't rust or anything. And we'll just continue the process, guys. So let's get this paper off that I put on to protect it whilst I was painting, because I just didn't want to get any paint on that brake drum or anything like that. So let's get all of that off. Obviously it's still a little bit wet, so just careful not to get any paint anywhere that I don't want it. Get that off. And let's get this off up here as well. So whilst I think of it, let's cable tie up this brake cable that runs across there. I'm just going to slide it in under here, I think, where that seat goes, but the seat will clear that. So let's get this in just like that and just hold that loop up just like that. I think that'll be perfect, and cut that off. Don't need to make it too tight, just want to have that up out of the way so you know we can get the axle spinning. That comes off, releases the brake. That's just perfect now. Really happy with the way that's operating. So folks, I think we might call it there for this video and make this a two-part series where this is part one of the series, and I'm pretty happy with where we've got to. I'm really stoked that we've got those brakes working really well, snapping off so that's not locking up. We've got everything prepped for reassembly. I'll just run you through the progress and the way which I think we'll run to complete this. So the next thing we'll do is we'll flip it upside down, we'll get the floor back in, then I want to get this little panel in here which had that on-off switch, and we'll run some wiring down the tube. I've been thinking whether we'll use the ground through the chassis or run a twisted pair. I think we'll run a twisted pair just because we can then get the earth onto the engine and not rely on earthing through the chassis onto the engine. Then we're going to have to modify that little two-stroke which you saw we got running before, the 125, so we'll modify that so we can actually switch it off from the little switch up here. I think that's going to be really convenient. Obviously from there we just got to get the wheels on, get the different engine mounted up. There may be some issues, get the chain sorted out. The chain was pretty rusty that came off of this, and just get a fuel tank. Haven't sourced a nice fuel tank, but find a nice square fuel tank to go on there and just get it all up and running. But that's in the next video. If you have liked the video, give us a like and drop us a comment down below. Watch out for part 2. And also on the channel, you'll find we do a bunch of DIY maintenance and servicing on vehicles. On the channel, we've got the Audi, the Mercedes, the Mazda 3, the early Ford Falcon, got a little Holden Barina, Toyota Corolla, so there's something in there for everyone. Also a bit of DIY around the house. So if you're interested in any of that content, do remember to subscribe to the channel. But until next time, have a good evening.